This YouTuber went from 0 to 10,000 subscribers in 60 days, and they did it with only 2 videos. Every day, thousands of people are starting YouTube channels, and we typically hear the same advice, right? You need to follow trends. You have to optimize your keywords. You need to make sure you're posting consistently. But this creator hasn't done any of that. Meet Bonzo, a rapidly growing creator who's ignored all the general advice. By trade, they're a filmmaker who decided they're going to experiment with YouTube. Their first video was already at 100,000 views, or very nearly there at the time of recording this, and their second video pushed them over the 10,000 subscriber mark. But the reason this is so important is because it takes the average creator, statistically speaking, 152 days to get their first 1,000 subscribers. But Bonzo did that 10 times in less than 60 days. So we've dug in and done some analyzing of what's going on behind the scenes here. What we discovered was really interesting because Bonzo isn't trying to game the algorithm in any particular way. There's 3 specific things going on here that any creator could learn from and adapt to their own channel. So let's break it down. And we're going to start with strategy number 1, which is Bonzo's background, in this case, filmmaking. And before you sit there thinking, well, yeah, filmmaking is going to give anyone an edge, I have 2 pieces of good news for you. Number 1 is that anyone can learn the filmmaking techniques that Bonzo is applying here, and we'll get more into that in a minute. But number 2 is the background itself here, filmmaking. What I mean is that most people, at least judging by our YouTube comments, are starting YouTube thinking to themselves, I want to be a YouTuber, and then they have to figure out what to YouTube about. But Bonzo has a filmmaking background and has completely leaned into that. Being a filmmaker is at the core of Bonzo's passions and skill sets, and this is what really gave the channel an unfair advantage. And it's not just Bonzo. Take a look at some of these other channels. You have Peter McKinnon, a photographer first, Joshua Weissman, who was a chef first, and Mark Rober, who was an engineer first before starting a YouTube channel. These are all creators who didn't start YouTube because they had some game plan to beat the algorithm. They started YouTube based on a hobby or a passion that they had, and that's what gave them their unfair advantage to grow to the levels that they did. But the other rule that Bonzo is breaking here comes down to the technical skill set. And again, these are things you can learn as well. Most creators are out there trying to hit that 8-minute mark, follow a trend, and get that really specific amount of watch time, but both of Bonzo's videos here are under 3 minutes long. Every second counts though. The cinematic B-roll pulls you in, the perfectly crafted text enhances the story, and the pacing keeps you watching. You do not need professional grade equipment to achieve these results either. I honestly don't think Bonzo's using anything too fancy here. It's really about understanding the basics, the framing, the lighting, the timing. These are things that anybody can learn, and in my opinion, they are just as important as understanding the almighty YouTube algorithm. A little bit later, I'm going to show you exactly how to implement these techniques into your own videos, but let's get into the second strategy before we get there. Bonzo achieved 10,000 subscribers in 60 days, and the filmmaking background certainly did help, but there is something else going on here that 99% of creators absolutely ignore. Look at the thumbnail on the first video. A silhouette stands at an open car trunk, and the text simply reads, "I lost my job." No shocked faces, no red arrows, no clickbait. This image tells an entire story in a single frame. It's cinematic, it's mysterious, and most importantly, it has what psychologists like to refer to as narrative tension. And where it gets really interesting is when you go from the thumbnail to the title, because the thumbnail makes you curious, but the title really hooks you emotionally. You see what they did there? The thumbnail suggests loss and uncertainty, maybe even failure, but then the title completely flips that on its head. It suggests hope and new beginnings, and your brain is sitting there thinking, well, that's not right, and you want to automatically resolve this contradiction. Their second video builds on this storytelling technique. You have the thumbnail, which shows them lying in the street. It's casual, it's vulnerable, and the text is asking, what the do I do now? Then you pair that with the title, 478 Days of Living My Car in San Francisco, and you have another irresistible story. This visual hook gets the viewer wondering, has the situation gotten any worse, any better? And the only way to get the answer is to click. What I really love about these thumbnails most of all, though, is not that they're powerful on their own, which they are, but together they create quite the visual narrative. It's the same cinematic style with the same color palette and the same mysterious but compelling energy. When you look at the channel as a whole with the 2 videos in front of us, they stand out not because they're flashy or loud, but because they're intentional. They create a curiosity gap, and it happens that these 2 videos work together because they are part of a cohesive story. But winning the click is half the battle, and there's a third strategy going on here that managed to get this channel to 10,000 subscribers in 60 days. Let's take a look at how Bonzo keeps people watching from the very first second all the way to the very end. Take a look at how the first video opens. There's no fancy intro, no, hey guys, I'm so-and-so. It's just text on a plain background. A simple quote that pulls you in word by word. It's not random either, and the pacing here is very, very deliberate. If Bonzo can get us watching past that 10-second mark, that's a pretty strong sign to the algorithm, especially considering this video is so short. That's a big chunk already. From there, boom, straight into the story. No fluff, no filler, just pure narrative momentum. This creates what filmmakers like to call visual rhythm. But also, listen to this.
I gave money back to my dad. I took my girl out on dates. I took my friends out for drinks. And most importantly, I paid back the banks. For once in my life, I was financially comfortable. Then I lost my job. And now I'm just this unemployed guy that lives in his car.
Notice how the music and the sound effects and the voiceover are all working together. It's not just someone talking over footage, it's storytelling. Every element serves a purpose. The B-roll visually enforces the story. The sound design creates emotional texture. The pacing keeps you hanging on every word. And just when you think everything's about to wrap up willy-nilly, they do something with the ending that is brilliant.
I heard you still sleeping in your car in San Francisco.
This isn't just an ending, it's a bridge. They've created an open loop, and the only way to close that loop is to watch the next video.
For a whole year, I didn't tell my job that I was living in my car.
And of course, this one jumps right in, addressing that question, building off the momentum of the first video. There's no recap here, no explanation required, just pure storytelling. If you happen to watch this video first, you don't need the context of the first one either. This is why Bonzo's videos just feel so different compared to the average YouTube video that I see around these days. Bonzo's really in it for the art form. It's not just making content, it's like crafting an experience. And you might be thinking, well, that all sounds great, but I'm not a filmmaker and I am not in the same position that Bonzo's in, so what do you want me to do here? And what I would say back to you is try not to miss the whole point of this entire video. Bonzo didn't sit there trying to crack the algorithm or anything like that. Bonzo used a superpower, filmmaking, and stood out on YouTube. This platform is saturated with creators who are trying to be YouTubers, but it is hungry for people who are being authentic. People who simply want to share a story or experience or just some advice or make you laugh. What you need to do is ask yourself, what's your unfair advantage? And can you point a camera at it? You have got to have skills or a passion or an interest or something that isn't just be a YouTuber. Once you get that figured out and you get to making some videos, it might be time to eventually prepare for monetization. And if Rob had to start all over again, here's how he'd do it in 90 days.